free. As many of you know, tonight we were supposed to have a hard money lender here. Unfortunately, he called me at kind of the last minute, told me he had a death in the family and he would not be able to make it. Thankfully, Mr. Pat Gage was able to step in and fill in for us. He is an investor who is well-versed, very well-versed in all aspects of commercial real estate. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pat Gage.
You guys hear me now? Awesome. Hello, and thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys showing up at this gruesome weather here, I guess, that we're having. But this is normal for Michigan, right? Eddie kind of gave me a flavor of what the room is like. So you are beginning investors or have done a couple, 3 deals, mostly in residential. Is that correct? Is that a good synopsis of what I got? Okay. Yeah. All right. I came from the residential area. I'm an investor. I'm a private equity lender and a syndicator. So I'm on the commercial side of the business. I started in residential real estate. I started in the city of Detroit a few years ago. I need to back up a little bit.
You're good.
With Section 8 houses, and then moved into foreclosures and pre-foreclosures and stuff like that. And short sales before anybody knew what they were, before they were really posh to do. So I have a lot of experience in the residential area. My last 10 or so years have been in the commercial realm. Now the commercial buildings, apartments, self-storages, mobile home parks. It's typically or basically the same type of thing in residential, just with another zero on it. So that's really what I do. We invest in apartment buildings. Like I said, I own 188 units right now in Tulsa, Oklahoma with a group. And we are doing a new development in Des Moines, Iowa. Coming out this summer. So a lot of different experiences, but I can kind of relate to where you are, what are you struggling with right now. So I guess, what is the one thing that you're struggling with right now in this market?
One of the things that I'm struggling with is multi-family dwellings, apartments.
Okay.
When you go to look at the property, they have cash offers, and there's no way not me anyway, that a single person can compete with investors there.
Gotcha.
With cash offers.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'll repeat the question so they can hear it on Zoom. The question was, is when you go and look at a multifamily or a commercial property, you're butting up against people who have cash or bigger players in the deal, right?
Exactly.
And my question, or I should say my comment back to that is, you're going to do multifamily or commercial with teams. I don't own the 188 units myself. I'm part of a team that went in and bought the property. So we experience the same thing. We're putting offers in on properties now, 132, 130, 120, 130, and we're still getting beaten out by other syndicators or groups that want to pay more. What I would say to that is, one, if you're looking at multifamily, get yourself lined up with somebody who has financing that can finance it, private equity. I rely on private investors such as yourself to pool money together legally and purchase these properties. You can never really, with a cash offer, it's hard to compete with that unless you're going to go over what the asking is. I mean, to the seller, it's cash, right? When we buy a 100 unit property, it's cash to the seller. But somebody coming with total cash, like writing a check in cash, not financing, yeah, unless your financing options are a little bit higher than theirs, you probably always will lose out to that. But it's a team sport in the commercial business, meaning find somebody, a private lender or something like that you can come in and either offer cash prices. And I'm assuming these are like what, duplexes, triplexes?
No, apartment.
Like how many units?
12 to 24.
Okay, that's a perfect size. So you're probably going to, first, I would suggest you, one, to get hooked up with a mortgage lender or a broker that can get you finance quickly, and then 2, start talking to people like in this room that you can count on to give money when you have to do the closing. The only thing on that side of the business which you would do is increase or increase the terms, meaning make it more advantageous to the seller to do business with you. All cash, that's tough. That's tough to beat, right? You know, so that's what I would say. Or you can try to do some seller financing with the person. Hey, if they want to buy the building, but you're going to offer them a seller finance where he takes back the note and you give him 4 or 5% interest on top of that. But it is hard to beat like somebody just coming in and writing a check for it. But again, you can still go and get a partner who has got funds. And, 24 units is probably 5 million, somewhere in that range.
1.2, 1.3.
Okay, so I would say if that's one avenue you want to pursue, try to find a private equity person or a company to come in and back you with that and have them write the check. And then you bring the deal to them. And that way you can be a cash player. Is the reason, do you do or think of using financing or have not thought that far? Okay, yeah, you could do both. Typically, when we do a cash offer, it's lower than a financed offer would be. Always, because I'm gonna have to go get that money from somewhere, but most of ours are leveraged, which means we have debt on the property. Now, I'm not saying, well, you can't do a construction loan now because it's going to price you out of the market. But before you could do that, put a hard money loan on it, right? And then refinance it out. I wouldn't recommend that now. But I would try to do that. One, get signed up with get a connection with somebody who has private equity or private equity company that's looking to invest in those type of properties and can write a check at closing. And then figure out how you're going to get it financed on the other end, or what your exit strategy is on the other side. If you're going to go and get a loan yourself and put a loan on it and buy them out of that and then run it that way. So that's what I would do. And there's a lot of private equity companies in town here that would do that, but I would sit with them first and figure out what their criteria is, what's their holding pattern, what strategies like that. And then you can compete on the cash offer. But typically, if it's cash offer, it's usually lower than asking. And I can tell you right now, sellers right now haven't come to the realization that their party's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're still thinking, hey, way up here, I just got a whisper price on a property. We're looking at $11.2 million. And I'm like, I can underwrite it and I can get 6. And that's on a good day. And it's, and they're trying to sell it at in a commercial, you sell it by cap rates. They're doing like a 4 cap. Yeah, it's just, you can't do that. It just doesn't make sense because the interest rates are at 7%. They're not at 5% anymore. So it kind of changes your thing. Yes, Mr. Eddie.
For those who may not know, would you please explain what a cap rate is?
Good question. Sorry about that.
No problem.
A cap rate. A cap rate is a capitalization rate. It is a indication in commercial real estate of the value of the property. We use a cap rate like a 5 cap or a 6 cap or a 7 cap. You divide that into the net operating income and get the value of the property. And this is only for commercial. Commercial properties are 5 units and above. So when we talk about cap rates in commercial properties, that's how we value it. Now, commercial properties are, like I've said, self-storage, apartment buildings. This building here, somebody owns this building and Kirby probably leases it from them. And it's a long-term lease. They're called like triple net leases. So there's a lot of different commercial applications. You can buy billboards. I've owned billboards as well. Those are generating cell towers, same thing. Those are properties that produce income. And Verizon doesn't own these towers around here. They just lease them from the landowner. So that's another avenue for that. Any other questions about that? I don't mean to get too involved. I want to stay on topic here with you guys.
So how do you find investors? Are there different investing groups that are locally, or do you just get a bunch of your friends and say, figure this out?
Both.
Okay.
Yes, to your friends, and you always tell people what you're doing. And then there's a lot of online groups, online meetups, and I'm part of several masterminds of people who do this together, people who do mobile home parks, people who do apartment buildings, and then you meet them through a Zoom meeting like you see here, and then you just do it. So I'm people I'm investing with in Tulsa are all over the country. I never met personally the principals in that deal. I just know them from the groups I'm involved in. That's a good question. With social media, it's so much easier now to do that and to be part of these groups, especially during the shutdown. It's so much easier to be on these Zoom meetings and go to Meetup and search, real estate meetings. Facebook is another good group to get, search on there and see, and target what you're interested in. And there's going to be a group for that on whatever social media platform it is. But that's a great question.
But it's advantageous to you to be in a group. I mean, you have, are there like agreements that you sign? How do you know in terms of your investment? How do you know what your what your return is or what you're expecting? Or how does that work?
Okay, so you're talking about if you find and you want to be an active investor or passive investor in somebody else's let's say syndication. Good question. The question is how do we find that out? Well, first of all, in commercial syndication or any investment, there should be what is called a PPM or a private placement memorandum, which is basically it's a document that shows everything that can go right and everything that can go wrong with this investment, what you're investing in, all that sort of stuff in there. And they give you that once you raise your hand and say, hey, I want to invest 50,000 in this parking lot or this apartment building or whatever it is. And that you get through the group, the principals, or what's typically called the GP group, general partner group, that is putting on this syndication. You would read that. But before that, let me back up a minute. You would attend a webinar, typically a webinar or a Zoom meeting that shares with you the holistic view of what this investment is. It's typically a time frame to it, right? Is it 5 to 7 years? Is it going to be refinanced in 2 years? What's our returns? Why are we investing in this? And they give that presentation. At the end of that, then you raise your hand and say, you know what, I would like more information. And then you go into another sales funnel, basically, where they go in deep, give you those documents, and then you invest that way. And you would also talk to the people in the group or a group that you're with and ask them if other people are in the group investing with them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
With the Vernon Madoffs in the world, and all the other internet scams that's going on, how do you decipher, if something is actually viable for you, or if it's, just a scam?
Okay. The question is how in today's digital world do you get into these investments with not being taken? Right?
Yeah.
Good question. There's you don't do business with people that you don't know, like, and trust. Okay, meaning that you're not going to trip into these groups and find that somebody's got a apartment building and here's $50,000. Here you go. You're going to investigate the group. You're going to talk with other people who have invested with a person or know this person. A lot of times you will meet them at other conferences. I've met a lot of my investor friends at a lot of conferences I go to on a yearly or monthly basis. And that's how you get to know these syndicators or these people who have opportunities like this. And then you just get your questions answered for them. Biggest thing is if they don't answer all your questions to your satisfaction, then I wouldn't invest with them. But it's a business where like and trust them, because like the people that I invested with over there, I may not have ever seen or met the GP, but I'm friendly with them. I can call them up. I've had them on my Zooms. We know each other, but I know other people who have also invested with them as well alongside me. And they're in the same groups.
You have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, you always have to do your due diligence. And this is again, this is for investing outside of your local area, right? I don't invest in this area. I invest in the west side of the state, in Iowa and other areas. So I had to hone my skills as far as evaluation, meeting people, finding out these groups, like with the people at the team that I've got in Iowa. We met at a Zoom conference, and we became close. We started working together, started underwriting stuff together, and then that's how the team developed. And after 10 months of working with them, we finally found something. But at that time there, we already knew each other. We were meeting weekly, we were underwriting, we were calling each other, we got to know each other during that process. And that'll be the same thing here too, is if you find people that you want to invest with, you'll do the same thing.
Now, is there a contract or something that you all signed? Is it something that you say, once you decide you want to invest, you get like a contract? Okay. And you have your lawyer look it over.
Yes, he's asking, is there any kind of contracts when you get into these investments? Yes. Now I'm talking my example of us in this development we're doing in Des Moines. Yes, when we got to the point of we are going to send money, I'm going to send, $25,000 to you. We first form an LLC that's going to hold the property. There's going to be an LLC that's going to be for our team or our GP team. And then we do documents spelling out everything in there, how we do that.
When you say GP, what does that mean?
General partner. So typically in a passive investment, there's a general partner and a limited partner. More than likely, you'll probably start on the limited partner side, meaning you're just going to give money to him. And he's going to run the day-to-day. He's going to do the property management. He's going to do all that. So that's a passive investment. Okay. Now, on your side, for the 24 units, it sounds like you're going to be doing the day-to-day, meaning you're going to probably be on the ground, boots on the ground. You're probably going to be doing the property management. You're going to be signing the leases. You would be on the GP side or general partner side. You're looking for a person that has money and just wants to place it with you for a return. And that's what an LP does. An LP doesn't have, or a limited partner, as the name, think it's limited. They're limited in what they can do. They're limited in what they see. They control. The GP of the group would control all the money and all the goings on in the property. So in your case, you would come to a person that has money and say, listen, I'm going to give you a 10% return for your money. I need you to put up the earnest money deposit. I need you to put the repair money up, and I need you to do the deposits. And also, if you can't sign on the loan, I need you to sign on the loan, and I'll give you 10% of this property for that. I'll take care of all the day-to-day. Somebody with money and doesn't want to do the day-to-day, they'll stroke a check for you. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's what you have to figure out. And that's kind of what I was going to talk about today, is active and passive investing. The active side is what I do. I go out, track down the deals. I underwrite the deals. I talk to the brokers. I talk to the property managers, get all that information and underwrite the property itself. That's an active investor, much like you guys are doing, gals are doing now in your single family. You're out there driving the neighborhoods, talking to the brokers, getting those deals in, right? That's an active investor. A passive investor is somebody that has the money but doesn't have the time or inclination to do all that stuff. So on the commercial side, it can be done. On the residential side, you can do the same thing. I had private investors when I did residential. I just borrowed money from people I knew. I had a PowerPoint that I sat at their kitchen table and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. I need $100,000 for this house. Boom. They write me a check, and they're passive. All they know is they get a check back in 20 days or 50 days or whatever it is. So it's the same thing. It just depends on, when you go to commercial, the passive side is a lot bigger, more so than, let's say, a single family or a 24 unit. that there's a difference, but in either way, you can make money in both sides. You do make more money on the general partner side, but again, it goes along with, you're also doing more effort, right? My investors aren't, calling the property manager every week and holding meetings and, sending out the documents and making sure that all the stuff is updated, but that's what I enjoy. So it's, you can do it either way. That make sense?
On some of the real estate investment trusts that I've seen, they're structured so that the limited partners have to get what they refer to as a preferred return, meaning let's say they have to get 8% before the general partner makes anything. On the type of deals that you're talking about, is that common in those types of deals that you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what Eddie was asking about is there on the limited partner side to entice you to give me your money or them to give you your money, we offer you a preferred return, which is an added bonus to the split that we typically give you. In commercial, typical split, meaning 70 or 80-20 or 70-30, meaning 70% goes to the limited partners of the cash flow, 30% goes to the GP. We offer a preferred return, which is paid first, like Eddie was saying. That 8% is paid on the cash flow first before the management team or any other payments go out. There's 10 million ways to structure that. But typically it's an 80-20 with a 5 to 6% pref, depending on the market. That's typical in commercial. And commercial, I'm saying typical in the apartment industry. That's typically how you can structure it any way you want to. But yeah, you can do like a preferred. And if you don't want to give equity, so now let me back up. The 80-20 is equity in that property. 80% of the cash flow and the resale and all the money's coming out goes to the limited partners. Okay. And 30% goes to the general partners. Now, in your case you can structure it, hey, Mr. Investor, I'll just give you a flat 10% or 15% return on your money with no equity, meaning they don't own anything in the property, but you have to make sure that that property cash flows enough to give them that 15% return. We use spreadsheets and evaluation tools to run those numbers to come up with that 80-20, 70-30. In commercial, we use cash on cash return. We use also annual average return, IRR. All those numbers have to match and make sense. Then that dictates the splits and the different prefs we offer to an investor, and also the term that we keep the property. 5 to 7 is our typical hold. Nowadays, if we get a property now, we're probably looking at 7 to 10 because we don't know what the market's going to do. And I don't want to be short-sighted and say, okay, hey, Eddie, I'm going to give your money back in 3 years. And in 3 years, interest rates are still at 10%. And there's no way I can finance him out. I'd rather tell him, hey, listen, you're still going to get cash flow. You're going to get your monthly distributions, but we're going to now hold the money this long. And that's probably the biggest key for anybody raising money on single family or commercial. Know your time horizon of when you're going to tell this person they're going to get their money back.
Do they have to accept that, or can they say, call it that end? Say no.
Well, that's where your agreements come in. And the question is can they accept that or call the debt in? Typically, going back to the agreements, all that stuff is spelled out in the agreements that they're going to sign and you're going to sign to say, okay, hey, I'm going to hold your money on this property for this long. Now, sometimes we have had where somebody comes to me and says, hey, I need the money out. I have to find a replacement for them and replace them to keep them, happy. So the next time I have an investment, but typically all that stuff is spelled out in all those agreements that you sign with the private investors saying, hey, I'm going to keep your money this long. That's why when you're talking to people, use a time horizon and say, listen, is this a quick flip? Is this a house that I'm going to flip in the next 60 days and I can get Eddie's money and I'm going to take Eddie's kids' college fund to go do that, right? And then do it and give it back to him in 60 days. But if Eddie says, listen, I need this money back by Tuesday, and there's no way in you're gonna get that by Tuesday, you don't take Eddie's money. And that's all spelled out before you talk to the investor. And you should have a horizon of what that is. Now, if you're flipping homes and stuff like that, it's a little quicker, right? But in the commercial space, a flip is 3 to 5 years. That's typically, now you can do it quicker, probably not in this market, but it has been done. But that's typically the horizon. So when you're talking to private investors, you would say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of keeping your money, Eddie. Are you okay? You don't need this money, 2 years from now to send Johnny to college. No, I'm okay. Okay, great. Then, but again, that's all spelled out in the documents. Good question. Good question. Any other questions?
You mentioned a number of different commercial strategies, apartments, strip mall, some storage, all that stuff. All right, in this economic environment that we're in right now, is there one that you prefer over the others? And is there one right now that you wouldn't touch?
It's a good question. Which one would I touch? Well, I'm in housing, so everybody needs a house, right? And I'm still in apartments. We are looking at, like I said, we have a development going. One I wouldn't touch. I wouldn't do retail and leave it as retail, because I can sit at my desk and order anything in the world and it could be there tomorrow. Now, can you take that retail property and turn it into a self-storage? Possibly, if that area commands that. So it really kind of depends, and you should be an expert in those areas or those niches. But I would say retail right now is a tough play, right? Look what happened with the COVID. Companies just stop existing, right? They just said, we're done. Well, yes, they still have to pay their lease, but at some point they got to say, okay, do we really need this building anymore? Office buildings a little rough, and again, depending on the area as well. That's why doing demographics and knowing your areas that you're in are better. Now, is retail in Florida better than here in Michigan? Possibly. Don't know. I'm not in retail, but you get more seasonality out of a outside mall in Florida or warmer areas than you would here in Michigan. So it just depends. But I'm in housing, multifamily, as well as mobile home parks, and also in self-storage, because people just love stuff. I don't know why, and God love them, they do. But did you have a question?
Well, not so much of a question, but like a comment. Having spent over 10 years in single tenant net lease investments and financing in those things, one of the most passive income investments that you can get would be a retail establishment, such as investment grade tenants like the Taco Bell, there's
Walgreens.
That.
Yep.
Those are in many instances, which is an absolute triple net lease. Then all the labor stuff that most investors are accustomed to doing, such as paying the taxes, the insurance, the income, upkeep, is all passed on to that tenant. And so in a true absolute triple net lease, you as an investor don't have anything to do with that. And to your point, if you do it properly and you evaluate a property based upon the rent of the lease, and of course that tenant, then you have an investment that, particularly if it has rent clause, something that you're not going to typically find in an apartment or any other active type of investments. If you have those rent clause, now you have generational wealth that not only the property appreciate, but it's not that you don't buy commercial real estate to appreciate, buy income.
Yep, cash flow. So
here's a really sturdy style cash flow, I call it a piggy bank, because if you continue to have that, and you see that monthly income, regardless of what happens to the economy, regardless of the pandemic, regardless of whether the government decides to shut it down or what have you, you pick specific single tenant net lease properties in an industry that is pandemic proof, Big blow it, I call that swan.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Now, did the triple net lease, is that, does everybody understand what he just said? As far as if I own this building here, I do nothing to this building. Kirby's does everything. They don't call me when the roof leaks. They don't call me when their property insurance goes up or they can't get somebody into work. We just own the structure. And like a Walgreens, a Dollar General, all that kind of stuff, they pay for somebody to build that building, right? And they just occupy the building. Another, on that same vein is a lot of companies now are doing sale leasebacks, meaning an industrial building or some type of building. They don't have cash to operate, I should say. They do have cash. Instead of going to the bank and doing a loan, they will sell their building and then sign a long-term lease with you for the capital. So you would go out and gather your friends, put together a couple $1,000,000 and go buy this building, and then that tenant would occupy that building and they pay you rent instead of paying a bank. But you get a bank loan, the same thing. So good point.
Now, with the triple net lease, they also pay the taxes too, I should.
They pay everything.
Property tax.
Triple net lease means that there's nothing flowing to the owner. Now there's in the commercial side as well, there's, double net, there's triple net, there's gross, there's all different ways to structure that contract or that lease with the person or the company. Now, what he's talking about, those are grade A quality companies, meaning they're going to be around for 10 years. And if they're not, they're backed by an insurance policy is going to pay you. If you ever notice some buildings that, let's say a Kmart was in and it's still vacant or something like that, Kmart was probably paying on that for 10 or 15 years after they went out of business because they have to, because that's the kind of lease they had. So yeah, it's the same thing as something like that. In doing it that way.
One last comment, going back to the cap rate. One of the most simplistic ways of using a cap rate is to determine what the NOI is. That's the net operating income. It's the cash that's going into your pocket. Keep the numbers simple. If the deal is priced at $1 million, it's priced at a 6 cap. Then automatically, you know that if you pay $1 million cash money, 6% cap means a 6% return. But what that actually also means is that 6 times $1 million is 6% of that is $60,000. So that's your annual income. That's your net operating income. Real quick, if the deal requires you to have a calculator and all that stuff to figure out what you're going to make, chances are it's not a good deal for it.
That's a good point. That's a real good point. And that's the back, what they call the back of a napkin deal. So like when hey, what is this throwing off? I can do that stuff in my head because we're doing that, but that's what same way you guys can learn. You can look at a house and say, okay, in this area, well, I know I'm only going to get, $1,300 a month rent here. Well, then I can't pay $200,000 for the property because I got to, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that carries over to commercial as well. It's just another zero. It really is. There's a couple more tweaks, but it's the same thing. You're looking for a return on your investment or your investor's investment. The biggest difference between single family or residential and commercial is residential is typically a loan. Commercial is with a team. Because there's no way that I can know everything about this commercial property. I hire property managers. I have to have an insurance agent. I have to have a banker. All that, yes, you do have that on the residential, but all this is a larger portion over here on a commercial property. Even a 12 or 24 unit, you're gonna have a team for that. You have to have an investor. You have to have somebody who's going to get the bank loan. Unless you can do all that, which I don't recommend, but having a team to bounce ideas off as well. Right? Just figure out, okay, how long are we going to hold this? What are we going to do? What's the game plan or business plan for this property? And help with that. Any other questions?
What's the tax implications on an investment? Say the syndication. So between the limited partner and GP. But they do all the work they did in terms of capitalization and all that stuff. That make this work the same in terms of you getting an investment? The passive income?
The question was, is for tax reasons and tax purposes, what's the difference as far as in the tax realm? It depends, and I hate to say that because I always hate people when they do that. It depends on your tax bracket and depends on how you entered into the syndication and what your deductions and stuff. But typically the GP seem that they're getting probably a greater share of the equity, right? Again, there's structures and ways to do that, but it really depends on how it is all structured. In the syndication world, we do a cost segregation study, which is basically we're depreciating that property at a quicker rate than 30 years, and that is passed down to the private investors when you're investing in that, based on the percentage that you invested into that property. So let's say you bid $25,000 and the cost segregation or the tax, let's say negative. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of food. The tax benefit to you or the whole group would be $1 million, depending on what your 25% is there. So to answer your question overall, yes, it is tax beneficial to both sides. One or the other depends on where you're at as far as income. If I am a GP and I'm only doing passive income, I'm at a lower tax rate than you at a W-2. Right? So my taxes right now, with the property I got in Tulsa, I'm not paying taxes. And I can carry that forward for up to 5-10 years, depending on how much that tax credit was, because I invested that money in there. So is it advantageous? Yes, it is. It's less risky than having just a W-2 and hoping for your 401k to support you when you want to turn 55. So that was a good question though, but you should always ask and talk and see. And that kind of goes back to one question: how do you invest? It depends. Like when I invest in my deals here, well, we do a partnership with my family and friends, and we spell all of that. So it's taxed as a partnership or a JV, right? Or a joint venture. And that stuff, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, so do not hold me. That's the kind of stuff you'll talk to your tax accountant or your lawyer about and see how that favors it, right? If you're retired, you may not want to have that big income from, let's say, a triple net, or maybe you do, and it's not going to hurt you. And you can put that away into a trust or something like that. But that's a great question. There's just so many ways to structure it. But the best thing is I would say get involved in it, because that's a great problem to have, trying to figure out what you're going to do with your extra money. Trust me. That's the great thing. Instead of going, okay, how am I going to pay this bill this week? What the hell? Where'd this come from? But that's a good question.
I think she'll also add to that with structuring, there's certain things called long-term capital gains and short-term capital gains. Short-term capital gains, you're going to end up paying a lot more tax. Long-term capital gains, is 366 days, or maybe another day, a day after 12 months. So, structuring how to get your money. That's why I question sometimes with all the flippers and stuff. I mean, you can't how the heck, those are short-term capital gain transactions. Although I guess you can probably speak to this, but if you do a 1031 exchange, the document that for a year or two, the 180-day rules in the IRS have and all that, perhaps you can subrogate any taxes. But the key to this game is not paying taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're paying taxes, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And the 1031 exchange, just let me balloon out on that. That is a tax vehicle that most every person that you probably, like, let's say Trump, anybody would use, meaning I can have a property. Let's say I have a group of homes, like say 5 homes, and they're worth $500,000. And I'm going to exchange that property into a like kind property. And I do not pay the taxes that I would normally pay by selling off all those houses individually or a package, and I pay my taxes. I don't pay taxes when I do a 1031 exchange, which is a vehicle, the IRS, it's all legal. It has to be like kind. There is, like you talked about, there's some restrictions. You have to find it. You have to identify a like kind property in 90 days. But that's a way to take your residential money and move into a commercial property or into a syndication like that. Then you don't pay taxes on that money. And what they do is you just keep pushing that down the road generationally. I said that one. All the thing, then nobody pays taxes. And that's how you see generational or wealth that's created generation from generation to generation. The key is, you're right, is not to pay taxes or minimize that tax bill. Right? Go ahead.
Goes back to what I was talking about earlier, you got cash buyers. So if I'm selling my property cash, it's not what I sell it for, so I tell IRS I sell it for. You know what I'm saying? So you're evading the capital gains tax.
Well, I guess when you say cash buyer, to me, I look at it as a discount. Because I'm gonna bring cash, you're getting a discount.
Right.
You're not getting your 1 million. You're getting 500,000, if that. So I would, if you're trying to do the cash to not report, I wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? I guess when you say cash buyer, that's more on the residential side, as far as I'm going to go buy a house for cash. We're in the commercial realm and stuff. You really wouldn't want to do that. You would want to use leverage to do that, because they're going to give you 70 to 75% of the value of that property. So there would be no reason, unless you got a great, fantastic deal on this, to bring cash. Because you have, again, another thing you got to look at is the opportunity lost. If I've got 500,000 cash in my savings account, what am I missing out on that should be working for me? If I can go to a bank and take that same 500,000 and I can be in 5 different deals at 70%, making me 10 grand a month with that 500,000, or I write a check to you for 500,000 and I'm toast. So I see what you're saying, and they say cash. I get that. They're just probably bringing private money in and buying it with no mortgage.
The reason I said that, I bought a commercial property for $40,000.
Time to leave.
And this was some years ago.
Mhm.
And this when the market was down, and I was offered 200 for cash. And you know, and one of the things the guy told me, said, well, you report what you wanted for, how much sold for, to do a cash transaction. So that's what I'm talking about. So
I can't comment on that stuff, and I don't want to comment on that.
I'm
I'm on Zoom. That's up to you. I mean, I understand what you're doing. It's the same thing with going to Secretary of State. I bought this car for $10 and
Right.
that's up to you. But I look at it from an investment as far as, okay, if you're going to sell a property and you want cash because you're trying to not pay the taxes down here, that's not a good strategy to do, because you're always going to be taking less than what the property could really be worth. Because when somebody says cash to me, I'm going to give you 50% right off the bat. I don't care what kind of property it is. If I got to bring cash and not have a bank at 70%, you're getting less money.
But what I'm saying is, that if I bought it for 40 and I'm getting a cash offer, you know, the capital gains on $160,000 is going to be astronomical. But since I bought it at that price, it wouldn't be too suspicious about that as well.
Here's what you need to do with something like that. That's, and I get what you're saying. Then I would take seller financing. Then what you're doing there is you're stretching those payments over a longer time, and you're not getting that big, huge 160,000 in your bank account.
Okay.
Or do a 1031 exchange we just talked about. Take that 160 and transfer it over into an apartment complex, a bigger like kind, so the tax is not an issue.
Okay.
I see what you're saying, but that's what you need to do is if something like that, if the appreciation was there, then you talk to the guy and say, listen, I'm gonna sell it for 160. How about if we do seller financing, so I still get my equity, and then each time you get a check, you're only paying on that. You're not paying on the whole gain that you just made, and it's stretched out for 5 or 10 years with a balloon. But again, that kind of goes back to what your strategy is when you're selling this property. Are you going to take that money and move to Antigua and live off of it? Or are you going to use this to further your investment? Then you may be thinking, okay, I'll do 1031, take that money, no payment of taxes, and you move that money into another investment where you get the benefit of distributions and monthly cash flow without the tax implication, or seller finance, or basically what we call here a land contract, payment wise. That way you don't get that initial tax bill saying, hey, you made $160,000. Hey, Mr. IRS, how you doing? You're getting it over many years, and you can use that money to do something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. We get out of the legal stuff. All right. You guys are killing me up here. The thing is, there's so many different strategies to do, and I understand where you're coming from and do it. But there's so many different strategies, and you use the IRS code as a playbook, and that's really what it is. They show you and tell you how to do this, with this stuff. When Trump says he doesn't pay taxes, he doesn't. I know he doesn't. I don't. But I do everything legally, right? They set this up for this to do, right? They pay people to do and go buy these properties and do this kind of stuff. That's what it is. Any other questions?
Depends on what you're saying, and then you talk about minimizing or not paying taxes. So the goal is to always should be at a loss, so that you're reporting a loss every year, or those are the advantages of being able to move dollars from one place where there aren't any tax implications, or you have to pay taxes on certain things because you're moving your gain in places where you're not withdrawing. Distribution or receiving, I don't understand.
The goal of investing is keep as much money as you can, and you use these other strategies to minimize the amount of money or taxes you pay legally through that. So the goal should be okay, I want $10,000 of passive income in the next 10 years. How do I do that? And if investing in his apartment building for $25,000 gets me that, and he does a cost seg or a financing event like that, you get the money back. Then where do you take it from there? It's not like a one and done. You're always going to be learning based on what the investment you're going to be presented with, right? Maybe a triple net, double absolute net is not right now in your cards, but maybe investing with somebody like that, it gets you cash flow and gets you monthly cash flow. Then depending on how you hold it, right? Again, in a partnership or all your tech, that's where you need, again, a team. You need a cost accountant, you need a lawyer to tell you and guide you. Hey, listen, I got a W-2 or I make this much money from this. How do I minimize this? Yes, the goal is always to pay less, but if I'm using somebody else's money to pay my taxes, that means I'm making more money, really. But the goal is always to minimize, but again, sometimes you can't. But again, it goes back to the strategies that the investor is using. We talked about the cost segregation study, which is basically shrinking that 30-year depreciation down to a 5 to 10 year, which speeds up the amount of deductions we can take on a property. Carpeting and doors and stuff like that. Carpeting's like 2 or 3 years, but we squish that down even farther. So that boosts our tax benefit of owning this property, and is offset by the cash flow we get to it. That's just one strategy, right? To do that. So there's just a lot of different strategies you can do on that. But again, first thing is to figure out what you're looking to do. Are you looking to, okay, I'm going to keep my W-2 and I just want supplemental income and I don't want to be active. I don't want to be driving around looking. I just want to invest in somebody I know, like, and trust. Okay, then that's your strategy. Go to your accountant with and say, listen, here's what I'm thinking of doing. I got this extra 50,000 here. I'm thinking about giving it to this gentleman here. He's got an investment trust, blah, blah, I'm gonna get this. And then he or she will work out what the tax ramifications are for you on that. Based on what you have W-2, and other income you got. So it's a whole package. But that was a good question. And that's what you need to do, is forward think that stuff to figure out where you're going to do and what you're going to do with this. Because it is a business and it's fun. I mean, it's, thinking about how you're going to move stuff around and shuffle, the pegs on the board. It's good.
As a general partner, do you pay a lot of attention to like pro forma or actual numbers that say like for an apartment building? They say, well, we're undercharging our tenants, so we see there's room for to raise the rent by say $100 per apartment, something like that. And the trend, they say all the market trends would say that, you could be making this much money, but in all actuality, this is how much money you're making.
My first question is, why would the owner not be making that money? You raise it up to that rent, I'll buy it at what price you want to. That's a good question. The question is, do I as an investor or GP look at pro forma or actuals? We buy on actuals. We do look at pro forma and we project pro forma numbers based on our research to the investors, what we think we're going to do by knowing that area. Meaning, like right now, the markets are such where everything is a value add. Oh, you can raise rents by $300 a month. Great. How come the previous owner or seller isn't doing that? Well, he's tired, isn't? Well, yeah, because you can't, right? I mean, that's the broker. That's the broker's marketing. You have to take that with a grain of salt and run your own numbers. And that's where the team comes in. I call a property manager and say, okay, here's the property. Here's their T12. Here's their rent roll. Tell me what you're going to run it at. And they can come back to me and say, okay, well, yeah, their numbers are pretty on, or no, you get payroll's way too low. It's 100 units. You're going to need 3 full-time, and he'll give me, or they will give me their estimate of what they're going to run this property on. So I look at both, but I buy on reality, right? And what you're going to see probably happening here in the next 66 months or so is all these people that bought on pro forma losing the properties. Because I've seen some stuff that it's math. I just do not know how they did it, cash or not. It's just they've leveraged these things so far up there that I just don't have no clue how they're going to do it. But they bought it on, okay, we can raise rents $300 a month, until this thing. I buy in the Midwest. It's not the Southeast now. In Augusta, Georgia, can I do that? Yeah, you used to be able to do that, but not now. But we look at both, but we buy on reality, meaning what we think we can buy the property on. Now, that hasn't been the case up to this point when the Fed started raising rates, right? They were selling it based on me buying and giving the seller 2 to 3 years of the equity that I'm going to do. Just like you talked about, oh, you can raise rents, you can come in and rehab. Well, yeah, he's already priced that into the property. So when I buy it at 11 million bucks, yeah, I can buy it at 11, but I still got to spend the 200,000 to get to 11. So you're behind the 8 ball, but that's what the market has done. I know people who've gone into a property, over 100 unit property, in less than a year, doubled their money, and all they did is paint the outside of the building. But that's the market. That was the market at that time. You could do that. You could hold a property and do barely nothing to it. And there's going to be somebody else coming because the appreciation was there, right? 3% mortgage. Well, God, why would you not? But we look at both. We have to look at both, but we use pro forma or projections when we're out marketing a deal to investors. The question would be okay, how did you come up with these numbers? How do you think you can raise rents by $100 or $50 or whatever it is, then we back that up with data. You know, in this market, the average rent raises has been, you know, $40 a month, or, you know, over historically, it's been, you know, $100 a year. That's what we do when we project to an investor.
What the average income of the neighborhood is.
Yeah, what kind of class of property, you know, is it, and again, there's classes in commercial. There's A class, B class, C class, and D class, right? A class are your shiny, nice, cool, new buildings. B class are a little bit older, you know, 70s, 80s, and C and D are in your 60s and below, and depending on the area. So yeah, that would dictate too. I can't go into, let's say, an area that C minus and say, okay, I'm going to raise rents by, you know, $200. You may empty the place because they're barely paying the $400 now a month that you're doing. But again, that goes back to your research when you're looking at these properties, what they're buying it for, what's the cap, cash on cash, what's the cap rate, what's that area. All broker OMs are a bunch of lies. And I'm sorry if there's a broker in the thing, they're all lies. But that's a marketing package, and you got to take it for what it is. It's a marketing package. They're not going to tell you, yeah, you're going to get in here. Oh, you're going to, pipes are going to be stolen. You're going to get this, and nobody's going to pay rent for it. They're going to do the other. Oh, this is great. We got 300 a month. We can bring rents up, and great. Well, how come the other owner didn't do this? Oh, he's tired. He's under. Well, why is he tired? Why? He's only owned it for 2 years. Why is he so tired? But those are questions you do when you get in the research of the property. Good question. Eddie, you had a question.
Yes. You mentioned that you don't buy in this area, but you do buy on the west side of the state, Iowa, Oklahoma. What do you look for in geographic regions to decide, okay, this is a good one to invest in, or this is not a good one to invest in?
That's a great question. I had to develop my own methodology using demographics to help me with that because I didn't know the west side of the state. I have a son that goes to Calvin. That's why I'm wearing this shirt tonight. But I had to learn that by using census data and information like that to tell me the different areas that I'm looking at. I also have floors that I use, and you touched on as the income of the people. I look for 1, population growth. 2, I look for household income. Median household income has to be 40,000 and above, because again, I'm in the B and C class area, right? I'm looking for properties that are B and C, meaning like 1970s to, you know, 1922 or 1922, but the earlier properties, right? So I'm in that range. So I have to have a rent in that range to do my value add. So medium household income. I also look for the medium household price in that area, meaning that if all the houses in that area are going for a price of $50,000 and I'm trying to buy an apartment and my plan is to raise rents, it's going to be cheaper for that person to go buy that single family home than it is to pay me my rent. So I look for $100,000 and above there. I also look for the unemployment rate in that area compared to the state, right? Meaning if the state's unemployment rate right now, the Des Moines or Iowa is 2.3% unemployment. If I find an area that's 5.3% unemployment, I'm going to ask why. When the whole state as a whole is 2%, Michigan, I'm trying to think what Michigan's is. I think it's like 5.4. So if I find an area that's higher than that, I'm going to say why. Why is that unemployment? Now, it could be the fact that in that census block, there is no employers and everybody drives, I don't know those things, but those are the 2 floors that I look for is population growth. And the way you do that real quick is you go to bestplaces.net, bestplaces with an S.net, and then type in either the city or the zip code, and they'll pull up. The first box will give you income, give you annual household income, give you value of the household income, give you the unemployment rate, give you all that kind of stuff right there. And that's what I do when somebody emails me or calls me, hey, what do you think about this? I don't know, let me type it in. Well, wow, No, because the population went down since 2000 by 20%.
What about, future, businesses coming to the area?
I look at that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like the Amazon or.
Yep.
Big Three or something building a plant.
Yep, you look at all that kind of stuff, and you can do that by Googling the area. But again, that's the first swipe is I just go to bestplaces.net, figure out if I have never heard of it, you know, whatever the city is, does it meet my criteria right off the bat? Are they making more than 40,000 a year? Are houses worth more than 100,000? And is the unemployment that, if that's cool, then go deeper in that, and I can find that out by Google, the internet, finding out what's going on in the area and stuff like that. But that's what you want. You want job growth too. You don't want an area where everybody's moving out of it. And I do a couple different things there. Even before I get to that level, it's called the Milken Report. It's put out by Milken Institute. It's Milken. I think it's .com. It's the best places report. They come out every year. They give you an idea of all the smallest towns are good, but now it may not have, you know, every little city, but it gives you an idea of what states are growing or decreasing. You can also go to uhaul.com, atlasvanlines.com, and unitedvanlines.com. Why do you want those? You want to see who's moving out of the state. They post every year the most outbound state and the most inbound state, meaning who's moving out of this state and who's moving into this state. And they rank them. So I take those and I do that on a yearly basis. Okay, which states are everybody moving out of? Well, if it's Illinois and Alaska, well, I'm not there. You know, I take those off my list. So those are ways you can do that. Because again, what I'm doing too, when you're raising money, that's the story that I have to have for Eddie to invest with me. Why are you in this? Why are you in Grand Rapids, Pat? Okay, well, this is why. Why that's that. So you're building your story when you're doing this, as well as you're researching that area, so you don't get stuck with the building that you're never going to get rid of. Yes, sir.
You guys look at college towns?
We look everywhere. We look everywhere. And again, we start with that criteria there first. Again, it has to meet now in a college town. And that was a good question. In a college town, now you're doing with student housing. If it is a student housing, that's a little bit different than market rate rents. Meaning student housing is typically they're there for 9 months and they're gone, but it's a year-long lease. There's people that do invest in that. I don't right now. But that's another caveat of investing in there, that you get the parents to co-sign on the lease, right? So Johnny goes to school there. Well, Johnny ain't got a penny to, you know, nothing. But mom and dad do, and they're going to sign the lease, right? And then we're going to figure that out. And that's a whole different way. And typically, student housing typically does it per bed, meaning if you have like a studio or a 4-bedroom. You can rent it out per bed, and that's a whole different model. There's a whole different way to do that. But we do look at college towns. But that's the first question I ask. What's the population here of students? Because if that university is thinking about closing, which I know there is one in Des Moines that's doing that, then I don't want to buy that property. Because why? Because 90% of my people are gone. Because when that school closes, guess what? Just like buying at Lawrence Tech, if they decided to close that, and you own that property across the hall, and 90% of your people are students, you got to think, okay, can I get this at a good enough price that when half this population leaves, that I can still run the business or building this way? So it's just a different strategy. It really is. But that's used typically by bed, which is a little higher rents, but it's a year-long contract. You have to deal with parents and stuff like that. So it just depends on what you want to do. But we look at all areas. But I also, again, I hone in on a certain few areas based on population, based on growth, based on unemployment, and what my model is, or our model is, a value add, meaning I'm going to buy it. I'm going to do some type of improvement to the property, either redo the units, paint them, new cabinets, stuff like that. There's got to be a reason to raise the rents to get my money back in a nominal part-time, not over the next 40 years. So that's what we look for. And then we just know based on that. But I always start with, I forgot to tell you, I always start with landlord-friendly states first, meaning is the government friendly to a landlord? Do you think New York is friendly to landlords? No, it's not. Why do you think everybody moved out of New York? But again, that's just my prerogative. I want to be able to make sure that if I want to evict Eddie, that I can do it and not, oh, he's got to stay there for a year and I've got to, sign all this. Michigan is midway or a middle ground as far as landlord tenant friendly. They're in the middle, but you get some other states like Illinois or Ohio, they're a little bit different. There's a lot more stuff that you have to worry about when you're a landlord. One of them, Nebraska, I was looking at the other day. We have to give back their security deposit within 14 days. I mean, boom, holy Christmas. You got to know that you can invest in that area, right? But you got to know that going in. So when you start, let's say, evicting people, that you need to have that money ready, or that's part of your business plan. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I just want to kind of tip the tables to my favor. Not that I'm going to go in and be a slumlord, but I want to make sure that, she doesn't trip and fall and start suing me because she can, and she stays in there for 6 years without paying me anything. Or if I went to another state, I could get the person out fairly quickly. And that's the business in apartments or any investing, is to have a paying tenant there. So I always look at the landlord friendly states and then go down to these different reports. And most big brokers will, Berkshire Hathaway, they produce reports as well on growing cities and where the trends are. If you're thinking about doing commercial, get those are free. And that'll tell you a lot of stuff of what's going on in different areas. And then just investigate it. If they say, hey, there's an Amazon center coming here, okay, well, let me call the city, city planning and development department, city economic development department. Those people, they love talking. You call the city officials and not complain, they'll be your best buddy. Trust me. I call them all over the country. I do. Oh my God, you're not calling about complaint? No, I'm thinking about buying something. Oh my God, yeah, we got this. And they'll just talk your ear off. And that's what you want. You want that kind of communication before you spend even $1 in that city or state, right? You don't want to buy something and then find out, oh yeah, that's a waste disposal group down there, and they're thinking about building a nuclear power plant. Wow. Okay. Good question. Anything else? Okay. I shall stop here then.
All right.
I could go on forever, but that's okay. I don't want to bore you guys.
Especially since you stepped in so graciously at the last moment. I do mean the last moment. All right.
You're right.
So once again, all right, this is going to be our last in-person meeting of the year. For December, January, and February, they're going to be Zoom only. I do have a sign-up sheet if you have not been getting my email. So if you didn't get an email about this meeting, please give me your email address. That way I can email you the link to our Zoom meeting. It's still going to be the third Tuesday of the month, still at 7 p.m. It's just going to be via Zoom only. The one in December, we are going to try to get the hard money lender who should have been here tonight, but unfortunately he had a death in the family and called me. And he's on his way out of town right now as we speak. And once again, we do have some very good meetings coming up in 2023. We have some speakers who have agreed to come in from out of town and cover some excellent topics. As I mentioned, one of which a gentleman is coming from the company Equity Trust, which is probably the leader in telling real estate investors how they can get tax-free money via real estate in their IRA. You will not want to miss that meeting, or actually any of the ones that we have coming up. So please, I need your email address so make sure that you guys get the link. All right.